around the state of Oregon is help train up local volunteers and have a little bit of a leadership there in each one of them. And at the time we were doing this, you had people, and I know Bob Soden's with us from the 912 project, which is still continuing. There were a lot of those, and we were all different groups, but yet we were all kind of working together because we had folks from the 912 project that were part of Americans for Prosperity, and Americans for Prosperity part of 912, and other groups that were out there. And so the remnant of that is the changing nature of grassroots politics from the time we really got started in the late 2000s to its zenith when we had all the Tea Parties in 2010 around the state, was that some of the people fell away and some of these local groups just died out. Now, some of them are still going. Bob Soden runs a great meeting down in Cottage Grove. The 912 project of Cottage Grove is one of the few that are still alive in the state of Oregon. We really don't have any Americans for Prosperity chapters, but we have remnants of them, people that are meeting as volunteers, and they sort of call themselves various names now, and that's great. So now we have what's called the Oregon Liberty Coalition, and Rich's Western Liberty Network is part of that, but so are some other groups around the state that are affiliates of the Oregon Liberty Coalition. And we have a mission, and that's to keep those of us at the grassroots level working together in the realm of conservative political thought, liberty-minded thought. And so we have that group, and what I want to share with you today is the necessity of having a strong, good volunteer organization. And this really cuts across any volunteer organization, but especially when it comes to politics. It's really important in politics. And that's why we call it the care and feeding of good volunteers. And again, if you go to the Western Liberty Network webpage, westernlibertynetwork.org, click on training, you can scroll down, you can find this very one if you don't have it in front of you. So I just want to go through this with you, and what I'll do is I'll stop and Rich, I don't have the Zoom screen up on my screen right now because I want to concentrate on the syllabus. So if somebody raises their hand and wants to ask a question, why don't you just pop in and go ahead and ask the question, okay?
Sure, I'll moderate. What I would ask people to do is if they have a question, put it in a text. You can send me a text, or you can send everyone a text, and then at an appropriate time, I'll interrupt Jeff and bring in your question. Also, I just let people know in the Zoom group chat area, I have provided the file that we've referred to directly, and also a link to the file that you can get yourself. Everyone should be able to follow along if they want to. If you just want to listen to Jeff, his profound wisdom will permeate all, so you don't need the training document, but it's nice to have after the conference call is over. So back to you, Jeff.
Thanks very much, Rich. I appreciate that very kind comment. The check's in the mail. So those words, I volunteer, is not really something you say consciously to yourself when you join an organization, but you do it for a number of reasons. Right now, we see a lot of enthusiasm still around Trump. And I typically on Saturdays, and next Saturday, I will be, I think, out doing another Trump truck cruise, where I put Trump flag in the back of my pickup, an American flag, and we go drive around and drive the liberals nuts. And so there's a lot of enthusiasm for that. And one of the things is that when people typically join an organization, they usually have what's called that first rush of enthusiasm. And it's real. And it's a good thing that it's real. But what you have to be careful with is that after that first rush, then things begin to dissipate. Now, this happens with new organizations that get stood up, and it happens with, say, older organizations that are just changing leadership and bringing in new blood. For instance, us at the Executive Club in Portland, really the only conservative group in Portland that meets on a monthly basis. That was Don McIntyre's group from back in the late 70s, and they were responsible for a number of great citizens initiatives that got passed across the state. The most profound one was Measure 5 in 1990s, which dramatically cut our property taxes. It kept them in line with what is more reasonable. And so the Executive Club has just gotten older. People have just gotten a lot of gray hair and they've died. So one of the things that we've needed to do is we've tried to refresh that organization with new people. So when you bring in new people, then you get that new enthusiasm, but if you can't keep them enthusiastic or keep them engaged and feeling like they're really doing something important, then again, that enthusiasm dissipates, and after a while, you lose them because you're not giving them reasons to stay engaged. Now, with candidates or campaigns, so how many of you, I can't see you right now because I just don't have the screen up, but raise your hand if any of you went out and gathered signatures to recall Kate Brown. Okay. Well, when those recall campaigns started, there's always a rush of enthusiasm. People feel very strongly about it. When candidates announce that they're running for office, there's always a strong amount of enthusiasm there. Donald Trump is one of them. Alex Skalartos, even though it didn't work out for him, was another one, very exciting young candidate that I think will be back in the fight. So you get that original flush. Now, the difference between a candidate or a campaign, especially if it's an initiative campaign, you're gathering signatures or whatever, that has an ending date. But organizations like Bob's Cottage Grove 912 project has been going on for years and years and years. And other groups like your fire department or your fire auxiliary group, or for that matter, the JCs or the Rotary Club, those are organizations that are meant to continue because they take on a long-term view of trying to do something good. So one of the most important things you have to do is, after you put forward this grand vision about what it is you're trying to accomplish with your group, and you have to do that because you have to inspire people to come and join you to do something. Okay, no matter what it is. Recalling Kate Brown's a great reason. We all have our reasons why we signed those petitions, but the people who got it started, come and join me. Let's get signatures and let's let the people of Oregon vote on her as our governor. So you have to have a compelling reason for people to want to come and be a part of it. The reason I joined the fire service in a long time ago in early 1990 was because at that time I was in my 30s, and it was time for me to give back, and I felt a sense that I needed to give back. So I joined as a volunteer. I had no idea that it was going to consume the next 30 years of my life, but I'm glad it did. It was a very, very rewarding thing. So after you've attracted people, now you got to do the things to be successful and retain them and make it a long-term effort. One of the most important things is in the third paragraph. Now, this is really for you who are not just volunteers, but you as leaders of volunteers. Focusing on the needs of the volunteers is more important than the needs of what it is that you're trying to accomplish, whether it was our local AFP chapters, because everything that we wanted to do in our local level of AFP and teaching a local group of people how to go fight City Hall and win, none of that could happen if the volunteers weren't trained and motivated to go get it done. So you really have to focus on the needs of the volunteers. And there's some things that will just kill volunteer organization and some things that will make them very successful. And again, so much of what is written here is born out of our experiences, Rich and Mai's experiences over the years in working with grassroots organizations. So he talks about Dr. Sandman here, who's quoted in this article, talks about 12 most common reasons why volunteers quit their organizations, and which then ends up with those organizations just disappearing. So the important thing is that these are all reasons that can be overcome and can be dealt with. And in doing this, you're ensuring that your organization is going to be successful and that it's going to be there for the long term. And in having and developing a long-term organization, then you think about succession, and we'll get into burnout and family issues and so forth. If you think about the future, and we're blessed, say with Bob Soden, not only does he continue to run the Cottage Grove 912, but he also is really a driving force between a couple of other projects, and that is the Oregon Liberty Coalition. He hosts a weekly conference call that we have of all of our groups around the state of Oregon. Monday at noon, we get on a telephone and we talk about what each other are doing, and we're affiliated with Freedom Works out of Washington, D.C. They usually are on the line also and telling us what's going on in D.C. and what they're doing and how we can align with them. So the people like Bob and Rich, for what Rich does, is so important that they are not burning out themselves, and that they have other people that are able to help them and get things done. Because if one person in an organization is doing it all, you will burn out. You can't do that. You have to learn to delegate. And just like that, we all have our strengths, and plugging people into the right place sometimes it's a difficult thing. And if you're a small group in a small place, it's even more difficult because you just have a limited number of people to choose from. So then you have to put up with each other's idiosyncrasies sometimes, shall we say. So people leave when they feel like what they're doing on a volunteer basis isn't working for them. And that really means satisfying their needs. What their needs are, their reasons for being involved and for continuing to be involved. And so it is pointed out here in this article, and I couldn't agree more. And I'll quote from it: holding volunteers, in other words, holding them and keeping them, is more a matter of maintaining their joy than it is of maintaining their conviction. This is true. For those of us who believe strongly that our personal liberties right now are really on the line in how this presidential election works out, or how the US Senate races in Georgia work out, that's a deeply held conviction. And we are not shrinking back from that, because it's a principle of life. It's part of the reason this nation was founded. Our inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but are given to us not by government, but by God. Those are deeply held convictions. But at the same time, you have to have some joy and success in standing up for those convictions. And I think one of the great reasons that Donald Trump has been as successful as he has been in terms of enthusiasm out there for him is because he's done the things he said he would do. And that rarely happens in the political world, especially at the presidential level, because of all of the swamp and all of the things that keep reformers from reforming. And Donald Trump has achieved almost all of the things he said he would do. That is success, not just for him, but for all the people that bought into the idea that there is a swamp in DC and it needs to be drained, because everybody knows that there's problems there. So having that success brings us joy, and it brings us a sense of fulfillment that we're achieving something that matters for our convictions. Now, having said all of that, let's go through these things that are deal killers in any volunteer organization. Number one is burnout. And this is, I've sort of addressed this. And one of the most important things, and I've seen this with my former wife, Peggy Sue. She would get enthusiastically involved in an organization like the Republican Women or other organizations, and get in there, and because she's a leader and because she has great ideas, people immediately gravitate to her and give her a lot of stuff to go do. She would always burn out because she was asked to do too much too fast. And that's, I cannot stress to you how important it is to you as a leader to recognize when you have somebody who come into your organization has a lot of ability and talent, yes, engage them, but make sure that you don't give them too much too fast. Let them learn and grow. Okay. And this is just one of the main things, and I don't know how Bob Sowden has done what he's done all of these years, because he's just been a tireless worker for liberty, but it's the proof's in the pudding. The groups he's with continue to work, and we continue to make a difference. So burning people out, make sure that when new people come into your organization and they get engaged, you don't give them too much too fast. You want them to be there for the long term. Number two, cool out. Well, so the opposite of asking people to do too much too fast is not asking them to do anything. And this happens. And this is really up to you. Because one of the things that they say here is no one invited me to the workshop, or no one invited me to this meeting to do this or to do that. And I'll tell you, I'll give you an example of what's going on right now with these various groups around the country that are doing the Stop the Steal rallies at the state capitol, the state capitals all over America, the Trump truck cruises. Usually you get one or two people that are reaching out to everybody, saying, yeah, let's go do this. So somebody has to lead, but you also have to ask people to come and join you. So for instance, these Trump truck cruise-ins that I do out of Springfield, Oregon, there's a young couple that are new to politics, and they are enthusiastic. In fact, an awful lot of the people that attend these cruise-ins are younger people like them that are absolutely new to the world of politics, and Trump has brought them in. But this couple is in charge of making sure that everybody gets the word out, what day we're going to do this, what route we're going to take, where we're going to meet. And if they don't do that and put out the invitation, and then the rest of us share it out there on social media and otherwise, nothing happens. So somebody has got to take the lead. So the opposite of burning people out by asking them to do much too quick is not asking people to do anything at all. So a good leader will always keep engaging and leading the people that they're in charge of. And they make another really good point here. Don't lose track of people. So sometimes, for whatever reasons, a great volunteer comes in, a group of people, and they're there for a couple of meetings or 3 or 4 meetings, or maybe 3 or 4 months, and you're doing things and you're having success, and all of a sudden they don't show up. You need to stay in touch with them. And this is why, again, you as a leader, you can't burn yourself out. You can't do all of this. You need to have somebody in your group who's tasked with, hey, pick up the phone and call so-and-so, make sure everybody knows, or text everybody or email everybody individually. And don't lose touch with those people. Because if you don't reach out to them, pretty soon they start thinking, well, nobody there really cares about me and why I'm even there. So by virtue of the fact that you're reaching out to them is a good thing, and it lets them know that they're valued because somebody's taking the time to get in touch with them and to remind them, hey, come and join us. We want you to be involved with us, and we want to keep fighting for the things we believe in. Number 3, keep out. So this happens a lot, and it's a lot of factionalism is not the right word. Tribalism maybe is a better word. Cliques, right? So it's kind of like at church. It's kind of like in any volunteer organization, you sort of gravitate towards people, whatever reasons, right? And you have to be so careful that you as a leader that you don't let cliques of people not reach out to other people, especially the new people that are coming in. Because if they feel like nobody's coming up and talking to them, engaging them, asking them, what they'd like to do to help and so forth, then they feel like they're on the outside, right? They're not in that inner circle. And you don't want to have that keep out sign mentally to be flashing in people's minds. So in the larger groups, and they make a really great point here, you can have the buddy system. You pair people together to kind of mentor and become friendly. And I think that even in the smaller groups, you should try that because it's really important, because somebody who's coming in, maybe new to your organization, maybe new to politics, like so many of these people that have come to the Trump movement, they need to be encouraged. They need to be educated a little bit about how politics works. They need to come to trainings like this to understand better how to stay organized and be effective. And so having sometimes somebody with a lot of experience to pair up with them, maybe just take them under their wing for a little bit to learn what it is that they know and their level of competency and where is their interest and enthusiasm is worth its weight in gold. And I highly recommend you do that. Number 4, pulling out. So a newcomer, may get really involved, but they don't. Part of burning people out is making them feel like they're absolutely obligated. They got to do this. Because here's what I'll tell you is that it says here, nobody likes feeling trapped. And so this happens a lot in I'll just use this example of our political grassroots movement. You will get people like Bob Soden, who's affiliated with a whole bunch of groups. And that's his passion, but he can't be a part of each group and have a major role in each group because there just isn't enough hours in the day. And sometimes you'll get people that want to be a part of all these groups because they want to be connected. And because they're kind of leaders on their own, they feel like they need to be involved at a leadership level, and then they just feel like they're trapped because they realize they just don't have enough time. Maybe they have family obligations, maybe something changes in their life, maybe they just realize they bit off more than what they could chew. And even an example of this was a great guy who passed away some years ago, one of the real, Wayne Brady, was a great grassroots activist in the Salem area. And Wayne was with Freedom Works, and he was with Americans for Prosperity, and he was with 9/12, and he had a leadership role in each of them. And in many ways, he did enough to be effective, but when he was in certain leadership roles, he couldn't do enough to be effective. You know what I mean? And so one of the things that I did, because I made him leader of our Salem chapter of Americans for Prosperity. And here he was leader of two other grassroots groups in the area, and coming up with other new ideas, and they were great. But he just wasn't able to get enough done because he had too many leadership roles. And what I did is I got with him and I sat down with him and talked it through and just said, you know what, Wayne, let me just release you from this obligation of leadership. You just feel like you don't need to do it anymore. We still want you involved, but don't feel like this is absolutely more than what you can actually get done, given all of your other commitments. And he appreciated that I literally just released him from that particular obligation. So you have to make sure that people don't feel trapped. Like they give the example here of selling tickets to a lasagna dinner. if somebody doesn't want to do that, then by all means, don't pressure them to do that. Some people are just better selling tickets for lasagna dinners than the rest of us. So just always keep that in mind. Can't win. Yeah, this is really true. Nothing scares volunteers away, and I will say donors when it comes to politics and political campaigns. Nothing scares them away faster than a sense of futility. That you're Don Quixote, right? Tilting at windmills. There's no way you can win. And this is a real killer. Okay. If you're fighting City Hall, the old adage was you can't fight City Hall and win. It isn't true. You can't if you do a number of the things, and they talk about that here in this particular segment. Is not you as a leader cannot put forward a defeatist attitude because you just won't have any success, or that your goals of what you're trying to achieve are not clear, and that defeat and victory really don't apply to what you're doing. No, you have to have victory. And so to stop this can't win feeling, you have to build on the sense of efficacy. So in other words, what are you trying to achieve? The goals that you're trying to achieve, and how do we get there? And this is why you have to have a plan. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm working with a U.S. Senate candidate for Oregon that someone new to politics, businessman, wants to run against Ron Wyden. That's a really tough one, okay? So what he has to do is to put together a plan that has goals, that shows volunteers and shows donors that there's a pathway to victory. And you have to do that in your organization and what you're trying to do, your long-term goals, your short-term goals. What is it that you're trying to achieve? We had a great little group down, Rich, I think it was in Winchester Bay, wasn't it? I think it was, that when we were with Americans for Prosperity, we were urging our local groups to come up with a local petition, either in the city or the county. I know Rob Taylor does this down in Coos County. He's the guy that's putting forward the Second Amendment.
Lincoln City.
Sanctuary, countywide amendments. Two of them passed in November, two of them failed. People like that. And in Winchester, they wanted to put together, our little tiny chapter there had a guy who really wanted to get engaged. And he put together a little citizens ordinance. They went out and gathered signatures for it that said any new fees, not just taxes, but any new fees had to be put to any increases had to be put to a vote of the people. They did it, it got on the ballot, and it passed. There's an example of having a clearly defined goal, even though that was short term, it was something that they decided they wanted to do. They went out and they executed it. And because it was so common sense, it passed. So when it comes to a can't win mentality, or a can't win, like nobody thinks that Ron Wyden can be beat. I'm here to tell you he can be beat, okay? Kate Brown was eminently beatable. Unfortunately, we just didn't have the candidates that could get the job done. So you never want to have a sense or put forward any sense that what you're doing is futile, that you cannot win. Because frankly, if you don't think you can win, you probably shouldn't be leading a group. Okay, you need to put forward an honest vision, realistic. Don't be rah-rah, pie in the sky, because people see through that, okay? But you definitely want to put forward goals and a pathway to get there. So you sit down and you draw it out. We do that in campaigning, and I'm not going to get into that now because actually there's another training syllabus that Rick has that's really good on how to run an effective campaign. So you cannot have an attitude of can't win. You have to have an attitude, yes, we can. Here's how you can fight City Hall and win. We know if we do this, this, and this, we can win. And so you have to put all that together, and that inspires people. It really does. It inspires them. They have confidence now in you that it is possible, even though it's going to be a difficult goal to get to, but you can get there. So lay it out. Having a good plan that's well thought through is inspiring to people. Number 6, can't lose. This is the opposite to that. And this is for people that are in candidates, for instance, that are in a political district where it doesn't matter what you say, it doesn't matter what your past is. If you have an R or a D behind your name, you're going to win. That's just how it is. It's really hard to get people to come and help you do anything in a circumstance like that because they go, well, why? I mean, you're going to win. I mean, what's the point, right? Well, the sad part about that is it robs them of the opportunity to help you be successful. And because they've not gotten involved, because they think it's a slam dunk, there's no reason to work, 2 things can happen. You can lose that way because that's apathy. Believe me, you can lose. Okay, because you never know. You can have a candidate come out of the blue. I mean, you look at all of the U.S. congressional seats that the Republicans lost in 2018. So the Democrats ran really good candidates who lied through their teeth, but a lot of them were veterans. Okay, and they talked like veterans, and they almost went so far as to really express the same thing Donald Trump was expressing with Make America Great, because they were veterans, they've been serving. Many of them were just putting on a show. If you're not paying attention, look at what happened to the guy that AOC beat. Nobody gave her a snowball's chance in hell of beating this long-term congressman, but she did. Because she came out of nowhere. And if you have a can't lose mentality, or the people think you can't lose, sometimes you can get blindsided and you will lose. But more importantly, getting people involved to help you, even if you know you're going to win, is so important because that then translates down ticket. Now, I'm talking primarily now if you're a candidate. If you're if you're in another organization, a volunteer organization, other than political candidates, this doesn't really apply to you as much. But this certainly does when it comes to political candidacy. Okay, having people involved and are feeling successful. Every time you experience success in a volunteer organization, you kind of want to keep going, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. Success breeds success. Everybody wants to be a winner, and everybody wants to be on a winning campaign. And when you are, that means you're there to be able to help other people down ticket. Maybe at the same time, maybe, you know, the Democrats do this far better than Republicans do, and let's just be honest. They usually have a long slate of candidates, starting with the most, in this case, Joe Biden, and then down to the U.S. Senate race, Jeff Merkley, and then down to the Secretary of State's race, and the Attorney General's race, and the Treasurer's race, and then the state houses, and the state races, the Senate and the representatives, and right on down the county commission and school boards. The left, the Democrats put out this big, long list of people in a ticket. Vote for them all, okay? We ought to be doing that too. But if you have a can't lose mentality, and I'll give you a prime example of this. Newt was not, when he was running against Kate, believe me, he didn't have the can't lose mentality, but they were unwilling, as I have learned, his campaign largely, to join in a ticket kind of a campaigning strategy where you would literally have, door hangers and people out knocking on doors saying, vote for our ticket, starting with Newt Bueller and, right on down the line. And if you have a can't lose mentality, some of the people that could help those state races, those state house races, those county commission, those ever important city councilor and school board positions, they can all benefit from people who are involved in a campaign that's just sure thing in a lot of ways. The training, just the sense of success. It's so important. No growth. And I told you that little story about the executive club in Portland. We used to have 60, 70 people, once a month. We always meet on the first Wednesday of every month. And it began dwindling down because we weren't bringing in new people. And you have to have some growth. It's just part of our human mentality. Because people in a volunteer organization will come and they'll go for a variety of reasons. And you can do everything right, by the way, and you still lose people just because they move away, they die. Family life changes, they can't give you the time commitment anymore to do something. A great example is parents involved in their school's booster clubs for athletics, or the parent, the PTA. Once their kids are out of schools, they're usually gone because they don't have a personal stake in the issue anymore. So if your group is not growing, you really, really have got to think that through. And one of the things you can do to do that, to keep it exciting, to keep it growth oriented, is coming up with new ideas, changing things around a little bit, making sure that people feel that personally they're doing things. And this is one of the reasons that Rich continues to do training. Because at AFP, what we found is at the local level, when we went, these 32 chapters we had around the state of Oregon, and I mean all over the state of Oregon, we went to them and offered them just some of the basic trainings about how you could fight City Hall and win. And this is important because without that personal growth, that somebody goes, yeah, I learned something about how you talk, the local newspaper comes up to you and wants to know why you're out protesting in front of City Hall. Okay, well, I learned that there's only some things you should say to them and other things you shouldn't say to them. Okay, that's just one example. And that gives people confidence that they have the tools they need to be successful in your volunteer organization, doing whatever it is that your goals are and what you're trying to achieve. You never want to become bored, where everybody just sits around because you're really not doing anything, keeping it exciting. One of the things I did when years ago, when I was a volunteer firefighter, I was voted in to be the leader of the Volunteer Firefighters Association, is I instituted a kind of a gag gift. Once a month, we would have a Volunteers Association meeting, and we would do a gag gift. And I would pick out some gag thing, and then I would auction it off. And sometimes maybe it was just a bag full of writing pins. Sometimes it was nice Christmas CD music or something. And we would keep it fun, and people would bet, or they wouldn't bet, they would bid up 50 cents or $1 or something, and it was just kind of fun and exciting. It was a little thing, and it added a little light and a little levity. Okay, so you never want to be bored. Okay, and one of the examples they give here is envelope stuffing. Okay, that is one of the most mundane things you can do. It's absolutely necessary. And you got to find ways to make that fun. So let's say that your organization is selling chicken dinner tickets as a fundraiser for your local fire department. We did that a lot. Well, you got to make up the little coupon things, and there's some handwork involved. And so it's boring work because you sit around for 2 or 3 hours, writing and doing things and so forth. It's different. You don't do it all the time, but you kind of had to make it fun. We had a great fire chief who had a good sense of humor, and he would tell jokes from time to time, and you would just have fun with it. So when you're doing mundane things that are important for your organization, keep them fun, keep doing different things, and keep a variety of things going on. You don't want to get too far out of whack doing that, because you can have some negative implications to that, but don't let it get boring, because you'll lose people if you do. No appreciation. This is huge. I cannot tell you how important this is. And this is more than just giving away awards. Everybody likes getting awards. We all do. I did, and I do. I love giving them away too. But it's more than just the thank you. It's other things, okay? It's making people truly feel that they are appreciated and that you're not taking them for granted. So if you're going to ask a Bob Soden, who's busy doing all kinds of things, to go do something else that needs to get done, like he's part of our team that plans the gathering of the Eagles now. Okay, so we kind of divide up who does what there and so forth. You've got to make sure that you get buy-in, and that if you're going to ask Bob Soden to take on something else, you want to make sure you say please, and you say, look, Bob, I know how truly busy you are, and I don't want to make you feel guilty if you just don't feel you can do this. But this is one of the things you've done in times past, and it's what you're really good at. And if you can do these things, then I'll go do this, and we'll all get it done. And it's so important. Having a little newsletter is also something that's important. If you can do that, if you can find somebody, and again, delegate this if you can. We're blessed in a number of our groups to have a lady who helps us. Her name is Donna, and Bob works with her very closely. And she's an older lady. She doesn't get out much. She's had some health issues, but boy, is she great at doing some things for us in the back end of things, on the computer and other things. Man, what a blessing that is. Okay, and saying thank you to her for that is just incredibly important. Putting out a little newsletter, giving people their kudos, which is good because it also helps people know what it is that you're doing. But then also those awards banquets. If you don't have an awards banquet, maybe attending another event, often at the Western Liberty Network yearly events. Other groups come in. I know I've done this when my group, Oregon Capital Watch Foundation, was running a college age effort here in Oregon called Project Liberty. I remember one year we had Western Liberty Network was at the Shiloh Inn at the Portland Airport, and that was Rich's thing, and we came up and we gave awards away at Project Liberty to some of these great students, college students across Oregon, had really gone above and beyond the call of duty and what they were doing. And that was where we just did that, piggybacked on somebody else's event. But it meant a lot. It meant a lot because what you're doing is you're making people feel really appreciated in front of a lot of people. And that can never be understated how important that is. But even if it's just in small group of 10 of you, and you're going to give an award to somebody for really doing something monumental, whether it's quietly behind the scenes like Donna does for us at Oregon Liberty Coalition, Oregon Citizens Lobby, the Gathering of Eagles, and whatever else she does, or Janice Dysinger, who's affiliated with a bunch of our groups. You know, people like that need to be rewarded with an award, even if it's just, again, in a small group, and you ask them to come forward and you just say thank you, shake their hand, if nothing else. You know, if you can't hand them a plaque or whatever, you just say thank you. At our last Gathering of the Eagles, we gave away the Ames Curtright Stand Your Ground Award, which is a yearly award now that Dama Curtright authorizes us to put out there. We gave it to Timber Unity. We gave it to the president of Timber Unity, which is Mike Peel. You guys would know him from the Axemen TV series. He was one of the loggers there. He leads up Timber Unity. They've done profound, incredibly impactful work as a volunteer group. And so we gave them an award there. And that's an example of saying thank you in a very public manner. And it means a lot. It's very important. External opposition. So this is a big one. And in today, I want to go beyond just family and friends. Now, this is big because you know what? If your family or your friends are not understanding or appreciating what it is that you're trying to do as a volunteer, you're going to hear about it, especially if it's your family. Because, you know, if you're, I mean, I remember a lot of years in the fire service. I remember, you know, getting called out away from Thanksgiving dinner for a big pile up on Interstate 5 that I had to go spend the rest of the day at. Totally missed all of Thanksgiving. You know, that every now and then that's okay, but after a while, some families, it just doesn't work for them. And you start hearing about it at home, and it creates problems for you. And, you know, if you can't find ways to mitigate that, you're going to lose that volunteer. Now, today we have another form of external opposition, and it is the radical far left. Now, that's not in the training syllabus here, but let me tell you, this is something else. Let me give you an example of this. There's a young lady who's a single mother of 3. Her name's Megan Marie Stevens. She's been organizing the Stop the Steal rallies at the state capitol in Salem. She has become an absolute target of Antifa and the left. And I mean to the extreme. They are threatening her personal safety. They're going to murder her. They're going to rape her. They're going to murder her children. They've been calling, they got her fired from her job. She had a good job as a flagger. She got fired because they were harassing the company that hired her. They've been harassing her apartment manager in the apartment complex she lives in. There's a price to pay for liberty right now in this place that we're in America. And this is wrong. Now, she's not a perfect person. Let me tell you. Okay, she admits it. She's got a past, but it doesn't matter. She has stood up for the right principles and values, and now the left is coming against her. Now, we didn't, you know, when I was doing a lot of volunteer work, especially at the grassroots political level, we didn't have that kind of opposition. The family and the friend thing, yes. You're spending too much time doing things for Cottage Grove 912, then, you know, sooner or later that creates problems in your family. It's a whole nother thing when you, as the leader of Cottage Grove 912, get targeted by a bunch of leftists who are calling your home or showing up at your front door or egging your house like they did the other night to Megan Marie's house, slashing your tires like they did to Megan Marie. Now you have a whole new level of problem that you have to deal with as a volunteer, as a volunteer leader. So in making sure that at least on the family and friends front, that you're not creating opposition that you can't deal with, is to make sure that some people are not doing too much. That sort of goes back to burnout, right? Make sure that people are not doing too much, and make sure that if you're kind of getting a sense that some of the family members don't want the volunteers to be engaged as much, then, you know, if that volunteer is doing a lot of other things for you, you might want to lighten their load a little bit, because that sometimes can be very successful in not allowing resentment to creep in, because your family now feels they're competing with your volunteer organization. Okay, that will just kill you. So be very sensitive to that, especially if you're a small group. You know, there's only so much you can do in a small group with so many people, but try to spread it out, but be sensitive that you're not going to lose someone because you're asking them to do too much. External conflict.
You muted yourself.
No, I did that. I was going to interject a question for Jeff, and I clicked on the wrong thing. My fault. Jeff, we've got a couple of questions. Jeanette asks, what are things that can be done to protect the volunteers?
Ooh. You gotta unmute, Jeff.
Can't hear Jeff. Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay. It's a great question. And it's more important now because of Antifa's assault against anybody at the grassroots level that gets in their crosshair. I think one of the things is you want to protect the membership. So you don't want, let's say you have a Facebook page and you have a list of your board or folks like that, or your members, you want, to the extent that you can legally, you want to try to minimize that, so that people's names are not out there, so they don't get doxxed. People don't show up and try to intimidate them and so forth. Try to minimize that as much as possible. If you're having problems with, you know, people coming after you and physically threatening you, like they are with Megan Marie, then you've obviously got to go to the law enforcement, okay? And she's done that. Salem Police Department has not been overly helpful to her. Marion County sheriffs have been very good in kind of watching out for her and so forth. There's another group that I work with that goes down once a month to the Planned Parenthood abortion clinic in Salem. And all they do is stand out in front on the sidewalk and sing and praise. And now Antifa has started to come down there and try to intimidate them. So one of the things that they've done is they bring in volunteer trained security personnel that are willing to, they're trained in and have communications. And this is what they've started doing now with some of these other events, like the Stop the Steal rallies. And these are people that communicate with Salem Police, that communicate with Oregon State Police. And they know that we have private security there. And they generally leave us alone, although they're monitoring. And when we've had our, I've helped lead and put together these protest worship events on Sunday afternoons at the Capitol. We started in May, and we ran them all summer and through the early fall here. We always had to have permits to do that. But even then, the Oregon State Police, they don't guarantee that Antifa won't show up or another group won't show up like Black Lives Matter and claim the same space, even though we are the ones that are granted the permit. So we have to have private security there. And generally, you know, OSP's there because we've given them a heads up. They always ask us, are you getting any threats online? And this is the other thing that will happen is your organization will get some threats through social media, and you'll need to report that to the police. It's one of the ways you can make sure that if you're going to have a meeting and you know it's going to be public, and if it's a private meeting, you typically you don't have to worry about it because they're not going to know where it is unless they infiltrated your group or you put it out there. And that's why using some of these new communication tools is good. In that they're very private in terms of kind of who gets to see it. So you don't necessarily have to put it out on your website or your Facebook page that you're having a meeting at such and such a time. You can do it through some of these private messaging groups, and you can keep that much more narrower so you don't have those kinds of conflicts. Those are the best things that I'm experiencing right now that I think are helpful in protecting your volunteer members. Rich, did you say there was another question too?
Yes, there is. I'm sorry, I wasn't muted and you probably heard my keyboard clicking. There was a gentleman or lady, I can't tell who it is, who kind of wants you to catch him up on your radio show, what's been going on with regard to Stop the Steal. I told him that I would interject that after you finish the curriculum, but go ahead and answer that.
Yeah, I'll talk about that when we're done here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll be happy to share with you a little bit more about what's
That was Ben Nichols. Ben Nichols.
Let's move on to that. Oh, okay. Yeah. Let me address that once we're done here, Ben. Personality conflicts, tensions, quarrels are not good in a group, a volunteer group, and this is why leadership on your part is so important. You, especially in the world of politics, we attract all kinds of people. Now, volunteer organizations do attract all kinds of people. And that's okay, but you just have to be able to manage personalities. So if you have, I remember one particular AFP chapter we had, we just had difficult time with the leader in that leader communicating effectively to the other people involved in the group. And it created problems. And ultimately we had to ask the leader to step down, and you know, that always, the sooner you can nip that in the bud, the better off you are. Because what will happen is you'll get factionalism and tribalism. If a leader who's not communicating well with a particular group of people has another group of people, well, you know, that's how churches split up, right? Well, it's no different. You know, churches are pretty much volunteer organizations, and the same thing is here. If you have conflicts and tensions, you cannot let them fester. I strongly recommend you get on them immediately. Once you're aware of them, you sit down and talk to people honestly, face to face, and talk it through. And sometimes, like this training talks about, as hard as it is, you don't like everybody, and not everybody likes you. And it's just the nature of life and people, human beings. So once you've acknowledged that you have some kind of a conflict or a tension going on in your organization, well, the solution to that is largely going to depend on you and your approach. And some groups, as it talks about here, mediate those battles. Others, just depending on your style, encourage the battlers to duke it out and see who comes out on top, to urge Some others will urge them to make up. No, blessed are the peacemakers. And one of the things that we've done very effectively is try to plug people into different places. But sometimes you plug people in your organization doing something and it just doesn't work. It's just sometimes people work out in a job and sometimes they don't, because maybe of whatever reason it just doesn't fit them. I started a charter school 16 years ago when I was in the legislature still. And it's the largest online public charter school there is in the state. It used to be Oregon Charter or Connections Academy. It's now Oregon Charter Academy. And I mean, we have over 5,000 students. We've got 230 employees. It's a $42 million budget. It's a big school. And we hired a school director to direct our school, and came with great qualifications, had been successful doing it at the ESD level, online learning and setting up programs, but he just didn't work out. And we had to create a process by which we were evaluating his performance, and it became abundantly clear that we just needed to make a change. And so we put together a system to, I had to do that when I was president of of the fire board in Sublimity. We had a fire chief who had grown up in that fire department since he was 13. He had risen to the rank of chief, but unbeknownst to us, he was engaging in favoritism and tribalism, and the department was rapidly falling apart. And we started hearing about it. In fact, his own brother came to me one day and said, if you don't fire my brother, you're going to lose half of this department. So we had to put together a process of evaluation and so forth. And it ultimately led to his resignation because we went through a particular process. That kept us from exploding as an organization. Donald Trump has a different style. One of the things that he does, and I've worked for people like this, and I don't particularly like it, because I don't think it's the right way to do it, but it works for some people. They bring people together as part of their team that sometimes don't get along, and they let them go battle it out. And that's his philosophy. He wants people in his inner circle opposing each other, because in his mind, the best ideas rise to the top when you do that. I don't necessarily agree with that, but he's had great success in his life doing that, so I can't minimize it. So I say all of that and tell those stories. Go back to the point is, once you have this conflict going inside your organization, that you've got to find a way to deal with it, because if you don't, you lose your organization. So there are different approaches as to how you can do it. And that's why you have to know your organization. For us at the fire department, it was obvious that the only way we were going to do this was to bring in some older fire chiefs who had retired, who were well known in the fire service, to have them come in and be a part of the evaluation process and so forth. And that calmed everybody down. We did similar with the charter school. We did a similar process there. It wasn't so much, it was our management company that came in and really engaged in the process. It wasn't retired educators and so forth, although some of them were involved. So again, it just depends on your organization and knowing your organization and which is the best way for you to deal with it. But you have to deal with it and deal with it quickly. If you don't, it'll get out of control and it could just explode on you and you're done. Policy disagreements. This is also a problem sometimes. Sometimes people who lead need to lead. But in a volunteer organization, you can't be a dictator. It doesn't work that way. Now, in a volunteer fire department, you hire a fire chief, and most of them are paid these days. But everybody else are volunteers, the training officers and everybody else who's trying to do the things you need to do to keep your skill levels up so you can help people when they need help. You can't vote on what that training needs to be. Okay? Your leadership, you as a leader, you need to decide what that training is. Now, sometimes in the fire service, that's being driven by NFPA standards at the federal level, state law, state fire marshal, those kinds of things. Some things you just have to comply with. You got to become a firefighter one. If you're going to be an EMT, you got to be at least a first responder status, and then right on down the line. So there are some things you can do by vote, though. Okay, and sometimes that's very appropriate. It's like if you're a local political group, like say the Oregon 912 project, or now the Cottage Grove 912, and you guys, you're talking about doing something, you kind of take a vote. I know we kind of do informally when we're figuring out how or what it is that we want to do, our next theme for the Gathering of the Eagles. We just kind of have an ad hoc group of volunteers that are kind of the steering committee, for lack of a better term. And we sort of talk it through, and everybody just kind of says their piece, and we agree or we don't agree. And if we don't agree, then we find some way to do that. You always want to be careful not to minimize that minority viewpoint. Okay, you want to be absolutely honest with them, but also be respectful. And if you are, then sometimes the minority will accept the decision, even though they may not agree with it and think it wasn't the right thing to do. But you still get them involved, and they'll stay involved, and you don't lose them, and that's so important. Now, sometimes with policy disagreements, you have to really take the bull by the horn, depending on the issue. And and this is where leadership is so important, because you may not have a lot of time. So something may come up, and you have to very quickly pivot. And then you've got to get on the horn or send out a quick email or whatever you call a quick meeting, on Zoom or on the telephone, and say, okay, this has just come up. We got to deal with this immediately. Here's the lay of the land as I see it. Here's what my recommendation is. What do you guys think? And you got to get on it right away. But again, you have to be respectful of people's opinions, but somebody's got to lead, and somebody's got to put the solution out there. So you need to come up with a solution when you have those kinds of things happen. When you genuinely disagree on policies. I'll give you an example where it can create problems, or you can find a workable solution. During American Prosperity, we had a lot of chapters, as I told you. We had a circumstance where the legislature passed a tax increase. The business community said, we don't want that. They started gathering signatures, put it to a vote of the people in 90 days, put together a big group of people, lots of businesses. AFP was part of that. And there were about 6 bills that most of us, not all of us in the business group, wanted to repeal. There was a gas tax, was one of those increases. Well, the worst of the worst was not the gas tax, it was the business tax increases and some other things. So the business groups, in this business group, there were some contractors and road people that wanted the gas tax because that would create more work for them. And they basically threatened to pull out of the group if any of us expanded the petition, the referral petition process to include a gas tax. And so we chose not to, because first of all, there were 6 taxes, and the worst ones were not the gas tax. But the gas tax was the sexy one. That's the one that everybody would have immediately said, well, I'm not voting for that. but it would have broken apart the coalition that was paying a lot of money to get something like $500,000 to get enough signatures to put this to a vote of the people within 90 days. So it was a big deal, and losing, you know, a big chunk of that money to get that happen, and part of the coalition, was a big deal too. So we, as an AFP, we chose to just focus on the 3 big ones, because frankly, we had to gather signatures for 3 different petitions. And that's really hard to do. Those of you who've ever done like 2 petitions at a time, that's tough. 3 petitions is really hard. 6 petitions you could never do. And believe me, we wanted to repeal every one of them. Well, we had a particular chapter leader down in Grants Pass at the time. He was a former lawyer, good guy, since passed away. And he was really mad at us. He was really mad at us because we didn't take on that gas tax. And even though we wanted to, we would have liked to have taken them all on. And again, it was the sexy one. It was the one that would have ensured that the rest of them would succeed. We didn't want to blow up the coalition because the larger taxes that would be more damaging down the road were the business taxes and those. So we had to work with him, and because he was really mad at us and he was threatening, you know, disintegrating the chapter and and he was calling around talking to other chapter leaders in our AFP chapters and beginning to spread dissension. And so what we got with him and talked with him, and ultimately the solution we found to that, he understood our point of view. He didn't agree with it, but he understood it. The solution was, why don't you on your own go ahead and you file the petition to repeal the gas tax? You do that on your own, not as AFP Grants Pass. You just do that on your own. And if you want to contact the other chapter leaders and say, hey, if you want to sign on and help me do this, you go right ahead. But it's not an official position with AFP. And that worked. He ultimately wasn't able to get it on the ballot in time, but my point is that we had a policy disagreement about which way to go, and we had to find a solution so that we didn't blow things up for us, because there were other battles to fight down the road, not just this particular group of tax increases. We had other things we wanted to do down the road with all of these chapters in AFP. So look for creative solutions how to fix these problems. And the last one is not enough fun. This is so important. You want to have fun at what you're doing. Now, you know, when you're holding a, you know, Stop the Steal rally, because you've invested a lot in this election, mentally and physically, because it represents everything to you. You're not in the mood to have a lot of fun. Yet in politics, using a little humor and using some fun or a festive atmosphere, even for serious work, is really, really valuable, okay? And if you as a leader, even if you're not a joke teller, you can learn how to start your meeting off, do your invocation if you're going to do that, your flag salute, and then tell a joke or two. And you can just find jokes, and you can find new political jokes about current political figures and use them because they're perfect for the time. And that gets people kind of laughing and, you know, kind of in a good mood. If you're doing a rally and that kind of thing, you can always tell a joke or two, but again, it has to be, know your audience. It's always important in public speaking, always know your audience. But also play music. Have patriotic music, have festive music, you know, going on. Keep it fun. Keep it so it's enjoyable. Yes, talk about serious things, but in the end, we're all human beings. And if it's just all serious, pound, 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 after a while, it just gets dark and it just gets negative. And if you can have a little bit of fun with it, telling a joke every now and then, some great music, keeping the variety and those kinds of things, people will have a sense that, yeah, this is really important and we're doing good work because we're having success. And, you know, it's not boring and we get to laugh a little bit. We do these silly raffles. I mean, I used to get comments about that at the Firefighters Association. You know, sometimes, you know, people would pay me, you know, $10 in the raffle and it would literally be 2 pins, 2 writing pins, you know, and then sometimes it was a really good gift and you never knew. And it was always kind of something that people had fun with. It kept the variety and it kept it moving. Always make sure to have enough fun. So beyond that, friends, it's all about leadership. It's about your leadership and it's about you being observant of other people and personalities within your group, making sure you have a very clear vision about where you're going and how you're going to get there. Don't let people work themselves to death. Don't work yourself to death. Be mindful of people's external pressures in life. Plug the people into the right places. And if somebody doesn't quite fit, you know, just go to them honestly and just say, you know, this just doesn't feel like you're enjoying doing this or this is the right fit for you. What if we maybe moved you over here to doing this? All of those things contribute to having a successful volunteer organization. If you have a successful volunteer organization, especially if it's a longer term one, then you're going to be there a long time and you're going to be the go-to organization. People are going to, you know, like when we want to get things done down in the rural parts of Lane County, we call Bob Soden, Cottage Grove 912. If people want to come to the Capitol when it's actually open, by the way, and they want to engage in lobbying in the legislators, well, we have the Oregon Citizen Lobby War Room. They're once a week. We rent a little room. We have coffee in there. People come in with their laptops and their iPads, and we're looking at actual legislation that's going on. We do a little bit of training about how you can go talk to your legislator, how you can testify in front of the committee. And by the way, those are all training syllabuses that Rich has on the Western Liberty Network training tabs. We teach people how to do that. And the reason that we do that is because we're a long-term organization. We have this vision for what we want to achieve. And we get people who come to us, organizations where all of a sudden they have a dog in the fight. Their ox is getting gored. And they hear about us and they come and be a part of that. And I'll give you a great example of that was when the forced vaccination bill was in front of the legislature 2 sessions ago. Well, the Russian community, the Slavic community, Romanians, all of a sudden they woke up and realized, along with a lot of liberal Democrat women, that all of a sudden they were going to lose control of how many times their child gets vaccinated and when. And they didn't like it. So they started coming into our war room, literally, and not taking it over, but filling it up. And we had all kinds of people in there that were not friendly to each other politically. I mean, liberal Democrat pro-choice women were out front demonstrating with pro-life conservative Christian women against forced vaccinations. They joined forces and they would come into the war room because we were there. And my point is, as a long-term organization holding these war rooms, people came to us. Timber Unity, when Timber Unity started getting engaged, a bunch of their people started coming in and being there every week, watching things going on in the legislature, because they needed a place where they could come and feel like that they were having an impact. And if you do things the right way in your organization, you'll have that long-term vision and you'll be there to affect change. And with that, I'll be happy to take questions.
Yes, sure.
It's a lot of information to absorb. And so sometimes it takes a little while to formulate a question if you have one, or if you have a comment or an experience you'd like to share with this group. These conference calls are recorded, and so we're going to eventually put them up on YouTube so other people can benefit from your experience and your knowledge. So if you want to add something, now is the time. You can text me if you want me to pass along the question or comment.
So Ben, let me,
Go ahead,
Ben, your question was really in regards to my radio show and what's going on with the Stop the Steal rallies and so forth. So in my radio show, what we're trying to affect, because my radio show is primarily in the Salem area, it does broadcast out into, you know, Lynn County and Albany and other places up into McMinnville and so forth. What I've tried to do there is to create opportunities in informing people about these events, along with the free Thanksgiving dinner that I helped put on, that our radio station was a part of. We had planned to put on a Christmas dinner, and because of the threats of Antifa, we had to cancel that, unfortunately. The Proud Boys, a group that has every right to exist. I don't necessarily hang out with them, but they're fierce defenders of liberty. They went out and they got like 4,000 toys for kids. And we were going to hand a lot of that away on the Saturday that we were scheduled to have this Christmas dinner. And so what happened is the Proud Boys then went out into the community and partnered with some other organizations in Portland and in Salem, and they handed those things out. What I'm trying to do on my show is to make sure people are aware of opportunities to come together to stand for what we believe in, number one. Stop the Steal rallies, some of them I haven't even known about until too late to even tell people about them. I'm not sure why that was, but I'm a lot more plugged into them now. So at least I think I am, and I can help with that. The Trump cruises, even if, and I still believe, friends, as difficult as it may be for some of you to accept, I still firmly believe that Trump is going to be successful in his challenges and will serve another 4 years as our president. If for some reason that doesn't happen, my viewpoint is that American politics has changed because of Donald Trump, and for the better, as far as I'm concerned. And I think it's permeating so much of our society and our culture. I look at so many of the young people that I go drive around in these Trump cruise truck rallies, and not only have they never been involved in politics before, but they're younger, with young families. They're fierce defenders of liberty, and they frankly don't care what people think about them. They're not afraid to get in your face. They're much more willing to stand and fight than I have seen in a long time. And I think that this is one of the powerful things that is going to come out of this movement. And I want to continue to be a part of that as a radio show to just keep people aware of it. I oftentimes will call Lars Larson has taught me talk radio. He's a good friend of mine, with stories that I'll give him the heads up on with interviews with people, because, and I don't interview them, sometimes I do. And I don't cover the story always because I want him to get the word out to a much larger audience, because I know it's going to affect change. So I'm going to keep doing this. And even if Trump loses, America's changed. And this new group of people that are getting involved in politics are not going to put up with what's going on. And I'm telling you, friends, it's going to be different from here on out, and it should be. We just cannot have politics in America continue the way that it has. There's a serious swamp out there, and there's a swamp in Salem too. You know, don't get me wrong, because there is. It's not as bad as DC, but it's still bad. And it needs to change. And the only way it's going to change is if the people rise up and make it change. The people on our end are not afraid to get out there and be loud and proud. You know, the Timber Unity, if any of you took part in those rallies at the Capitol, it was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. And it didn't matter where you were in the Capitol building, even in the basement, you could hear those air horns going, all those log trucks and tractors circling the Capitol for hours on end. And I can tell you, it sent a powerful message to the Democrats. And I'm telling you, it scares them. And it scares them because they cannot control it. This is not a bought and paid for fake Occupy movement. Okay, this isn't a bought and paid for fake Antifa movement, which is, it is. This is real. These people are not funded. They come to the Capitol with their own money and their own time because they believe in it, they're passionate. That's why I say America is changed politically because of Donald Trump, because he offered hope that you could drain the swamp. He offered hope that we, the people, really meant something still, that it wasn't just a slogan, it's real. And that's why I believe, and I want to take this back to this training, where we're at today, and I think Rich would agree with me here, when we did a lot of this training and developed a lot of this stuff at Americans for Prosperity, that our heyday was the Tea Party movement, right? In 2010 and 2011, then it started to die off because some of these things, even we were not doing good enough. And the local organizations died off and so forth. And it happened not just in Oregon, but all across the country. It's different this time. This is because back then, if you came to one of our AFP chapter meetings, there's a lot of gray hair there. A few young people, but a lot of gray hair. It's just the opposite today. You go to these Trump rallies, there's a lot more young people there than there are gray hairs. You look at that big conference that Turning Point USA had this last weekend down in Florida. There's thousands of college-age kids and high school kids there at that thing. You've never had a conference that big before. It's changed, and that's good. And it's my hope that as long as I'm going to be on the radio, and now I'm on the radio for 3 hours a day, at least for a couple of months anyway, it's my hope that we can continue to keep that momentum going so that it doesn't die off. And I just don't think it will be. I think we're in a different place now in America than we were in, because, you know, back in the Tea Party movement, we really didn't have Antifa out there. Okay? They're here today and they're being confronted. And this is not, you know, America's been here before, friends, and liberty prevailed. And it only prevailed because people were willing to step forward like Megan Marie and take the slings and arrows. You go back to the people, the signers of the Declaration, you know, 55 of them, 53 of them. They pledged their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor. Well, some of them paid with their lives, captured by the British and hanged for treason. Because what they did, they knew was treasonous. And I ask my audience occasionally, and I ask people when I give speeches, how far are you willing to go to stand for your liberty? Are you willing to be accused of treason, like our founders were? That's a powerful thing to think about in this day and age. But you know what? If people are not willing to do it, it ain't going to happen, and we'll lose our freedom. This great experiment called a constitutional democracy, rather a constitutional republic, not a democracy. That great experiment will be over, and it'll be for nothing. And all the blood that was spilled, and the sweat and the toil, and the arguing, the debating, and all the work that we've done in our modern times and our predecessors will be for nothing.
Yeah,
and
Jeff.
I don't think it's going to go away. It's not going to be like the Tea Party movement. This is here to stay.
Jeff, so if I could interject a little bit, and this is kind of one of my passions because I'm a constitutional conservative, and I put a link to Constitutional Live, which has been absolutely fabulous for anybody who doesn't really know how the Constitution works or know too much about the Constitution. They have, I think, 10 episodes Episode 6 is talking about what you're talking about the presidency and the importance of the presidency. But at the beginning, it talks about the electoral college. And there's a huge push to get rid of the electoral college to have it be a popular vote. And if we do that, our country will never be the same again. And the founding fathers purposely put the electoral college in there for 3 reasons. 1, so the people have a say. 2, for the states have a say. And then if those 2 fail, which is where we're at right now, the legislature now has a say. And that's exactly where we are right now. And there's only been one other time in our history where we've been here like this, not as grandiose as we are right now. But it's important to put civics back into our schools. And I'm planning on running for a school board position where I live in 2023 when it opens up. And that's one thing I'm going to be pushing for, is getting civics back into our education. Because when I graduated high school many, many years ago, I think I was one of the last to receive a good civics education back in the mid to late 90s. And then civics just kind of went away. And I know now, with being a teacher or being an educator in public education for the last 25 years, that civics has gone by the wayside. And you get a lot of these younger minded people who have gone through 4-year college that have been ingrained with leftist ideology, and it has twisted and turned things. And we got to get back to the original intent of the Constitution. What did the original founders have in that Constitution? Not what you perceive it as, not what I perceive it as, but what as they perceive it as. And that takes a good study of the Constitution there. And Hillsdale College is a good place to start. They have a lot of free classes there as well. But I just wanted to put that plug in. And then my question for you is, you're talking about it on a federal government level. Federal government has that much effect in my life, right? What has a greater effect is a local government. So taking what you're saying on a federal level, how do we narrow that down to the local level, to the cities, the counties, the state, to where we have that effect there? What are your ideas? And then the second question I have is, a few weeks ago, Kim Thatcher was asked when she was doing the lesson, are these rallies doing any good? Her response was, no, not really. But if people start to see that these rallies aren't doing any good, then kind of like this volunteer stuff is going to fizzle out like the Tea Party movement did. Because I was actually, in Texas, the Tea Party is actually still pretty strong. It's not as strong here. I'll tell you that. So it just depends on where you're at, if the Tea Party is strong or not. But it's going to fizzle out if we have people, elected or not, thinking it's not going to do any good. So how else do we get voices to be heard if we can't go in and lobby?
Well, so that's a whole other training syllabus about how you can make contact with your legislators at the local level, whether it's just the legislature or it's your school board. It's always easier to get together typically with a school board or a city council member or a county commissioner than it is a legislator, just because legislators typically represent more people and there's usually a little more bureaucracy to go through to get with them. But there are ways. This is one of the things that's not only in the training syllabus, but we also teach at Oregon Citizen Lobby, literally how you can ambush your legislator once you're able to get in the building with them. Now, even if they don't want to talk to you, there are ways that you can meet them in the hallway as they're walking from meeting to meeting and start talking with them and have a few moments of interaction with them. Typically they're with the staffer, but not always. And that gives you a great opportunity to circumvent, go around some of the safeguards that they put in place. Your city council, your school board members, they're typically people you can call up and say, hey, I'm one of your constituents. Can we have coffee together? I have a concern about something. Of course, you have to have a coffee shop open to be able to do that kind of thing. And hopefully we'll get them open soon. But it's usually easier to get with them. But the principles of a volunteer organization whether they're national in scope at Americans for Prosperity or they're local, like what Bob Sowden does at Cottage Grove 912, those principles of keeping the organization going and being effective are really the same. It's just you have to adjust them just based on the size of your organization. At Americans for Prosperity, there was kind of a national agenda from AFP, Washington, D.C., but then they expected us to fight our own fights in our own states. In fact, I took some great ideas from other states and what they had been doing. And the war room, by the way, came from the state of Georgia, from AFP Georgia. They were very successful in Georgia in getting some changes made with their war room, especially right at the end of a legislative session when things are moving incredibly fast and the legislature really doesn't give people the opportunity to come and testify. So those ideas can still be put together at the local level. The legislature really just kind of moving forward, at least in the short term, is in answer to your question, Jeanette, that's really going to be a measure of, are they going to open up the building? Because the way it is today, I think an argument could be made they're acting unconstitutionally because they're not allowing us to participate in hearings other than by Zoom. That house belongs to the people. The little melee that happened there, which unfortunately a few of our people got a little out of control, sadly. That was the right thing to do, was to go there and to protest the fact that we were not allowed into the building. And I can tell you that you can socially distance inside that building. They could control that. They could allow hearing rooms, because typically there's multiple hearing rooms that you can establish. When there's a big issue and the hearing rooms are full, they have overflow hearing rooms. Well, you could do that. You could certainly do that in the gallery of the House and the Senate. You could only so many seats available. They could put TVs up. And there's no reason for them to shut us out of the Capitol. So in response to your first part about, do these rallies do anything? Do they mean something? And I would respectfully disagree with Kim Thatcher. I think they mean a lot, and I think they have to continue. Because when the people are standing up and they're showing, when you stand up and lead on an issue, a lot of times other people are going to join with you because they're thinking the same thing you are. And I'll tell you, a lot of people showed up at that rally that I didn't even know was going to happen until late when it was happening at the state capitol during the special session. They showed up because they didn't want to be shut out. And they wanted their voice to be heard as we the people. And they were. And we have to continue to do that because it's inspiring to people. And when you look, how inspiring was it to see Donald Trump day after day doing these multiple rallies prior to the election? Thousands and thousands of people were showing up because it was a festive, fun atmosphere. And that's what we've tried to do with these Stop the Steal rallies and other things that we're trying to do. We always try to have good music playing in the background, patriotic stuff. And I think that's energetic. I think it creates a sense of you're not in this alone, and I'm not standing alone, and that's invaluable. People have to have hope, and I think those rallies give people hope. Now, it also has to translate into real action, but I go back to the Timber Unity rallies. That scared the living daylights out of the Democrats, and it derailed a lot of things. And the way it derailed it, because it gave the Republicans in the House, mostly in the Senate, the backbone to go walk out and to shut everything down, because that's the only tool they had left at that point. It's all they could do. All the procedural things that they tried were ultimately going to fail. Because once the party in power has that much power, there's very little that you can do other than to shut the session down. And that's the only thing they could do. But they would not have gone had not Timber Unity been there, just doing something nobody had ever seen before at the Capitol. And they had never, I never saw it. But everywhere you went in that Capitol building, believe me, even in the basement, you could hear those air horns going, and it scared the living daylights out. But it gave Republicans the backbone to go. because they knew when you have that kind of a groundswell out there that's true and it's not manufactured, not paid for, it's going to have an impact. And it means that somebody's watching your back and you're not going to pay that political price. This is why when they went after State Senator Chuck Thompson from Hood River, after the session was over, when the last walkout, they tried to do a recall on him. And I was part of the team that was working on messaging, thinking that he probably was going to get the signatures. We were going to have a recall fight on our hands. Well, fortunately, they failed. They couldn't get enough signatures. But what that would have done is nullified. Had they been able to have gotten signatures and recalled Chuck Thompson, you would have never had another Republican walk out, no matter how many times Timber Unity was circling the Capitol. No matter how many thousands of Oregonians showed up, Republicans wouldn't do it because there would always be enough of them to say, no, I can't lose my seat. I'll lose my seat if we walk out, so I'm not going. But the fact that we had those rallies and the fact that we're continuing to have rallies right now and that we're drawing on my pickup is important because it's showing people we're not stop fighting. I tell you, when I drive around with Trump signs on my pickup, people come up next to me and they're always giving me the high five. Every now and then I get the flying fickle finger fake. But that's usually pretty rare because most of the time it's people giving me the thumbs up. And that's important. That's absolutely important that we do that. So I think rallies and coming together, whether it's at our local county courthouse, I encourage people, call all the people that are in your circle of influence that you know are Trump supporters, that are liberty lovers. Go to your county courthouse, stand out in front with flags and wave your flags. Because believe me, it's inspiring and it lets people know. I mean, I've never seen that before. Even in the heyday of the Tea Party movement. The biggest thing we ever had like that was that Glenn Beck rally that we went to in Washington, D.C. You guys remember that? That was a huge rally. There was hundreds of thousands of people. I know because we were there. And it made a difference. But unfortunately, at the national level, when you continue to have the swamp being so pervasive and so powerful and influential that it co-ops even the good conservatives who come to Congress, you got to go back to the grassroots level. You got to go back to what you're talking about doing, Jeanette, and that's running for school board. That's how you can make a difference in your world. But you can't do that alone. You'll need help. You need people to help you get that done. Go knock on doors, develop your campaign theme, what it is you want to achieve that's going to make a difference, and then communicate that with people. Put together that campaign organization. Again, there's lots of great training on Rich's website on how to do that. But that's how we get back to it. And when it comes to these protests at the Capitol, when it comes to our local county courthouses, we ought to be there. We ought to be there with our flags. We ought to be standing up and supporting the people running for county commission who are going to do the right things. Like, Jack Atkins is on, and, Dave Daughter just got elected county commissioner down there. And he's a guy who, longtime Marine, ran for state Senate, barely lost that first time. Now he's a county commissioner. He's got a heart to serve. He'll make good decisions. And I have every faith and confidence in that. But he couldn't do that alone. And it was because there are remnants of our group, and Jack's still very much involved with Freedom Works, that makes that possible. And that's what you have to have, because frankly, you can't always rely on the Republican Party of Oregon to be well organized in some places. Some places they're better than others, to be honest with you, in this state. And there's some places where they ought to just be incredibly good, but they're not. And that's why we have to have our own volunteer organizations to help carry it. And there are some people who will, we found this out at AFP, and Rich will acknowledge this, and I know Bob will too. There are some people who will not come to a Republican Party meeting, period, for any reason, but will absolutely come to your little freedom organization, whatever group you've put together, because you're standing up for things that they believe in. Bob, what do you think about that?
Hi, Jeff. Yeah, I'm gonna have to leave here in a few minutes, but Yeah, Jeanette is correct. We need to be at the local level. I mean, that's why I'm still at Cottage Grove 912. I'm a vice chair now. We have turned it over to some of the younger folks to be the leaders. But it is the local level. I remember tax day at our federal building here back in 2010, 29. I don't know what the dates anymore. It was 2009 is when we started. In 2010, the convention for the 912s brought on the Oregon Liberty Coalition. And it is a coalition of small groups for many, many years. We just started allowing individual affiliates in. That's been a boost to get more folks to join in on conversations. Every Monday, we've had a conference call since 2010, I think, something like that. Every Monday, and then the Oregon Citizens Lobby came up about 2012, I think, 2012, 2013, and that's really interested me. I think Jeanette would really like that organization. And that's where I broke away from the 912 in Cottage Grove to be a leader with the Oregon Citizens Lobby, and the Oregon Liberty Coalition kind of fell in suit. And I think one point, you guys, how do you do that? It's, I think Jack will probably agree, it's Army trained. It's just multitasking was one of my things I had to do in the Army. A headphone here, and listening to radios and all that kind of stuff. I got to the point where I could do multitasking. I was multitasking while this Zoom was going on. But yeah, I do. It's a little different than 2009, 2010, 2012. 2012, the AFP leaving Oregon deflated a lot of tires.
Yep.
Obama winning the election deflated a lot of tires. We were really disappointed, but we kept going. A lot of us kept going. We're still here, and we're awake, and more people are waking up. And again, I do encourage you to get onto the telegram.org, and because it is a private encrypted network for discussions. And we've moved the operation, basically the Oregon Citizens Lobby, over to it, especially for this year, because we'll have the War Room on the Telegram platform. If they don't open them, we're still there. And we're still going to work it even if we do get a War Room, because it's an opportunity to everybody to get in on a discussion. Each team that we have has its own discussion group. And each of our staff members has their own group. So I think it's going to work out really well. I'm looking forward to it. It's pretty easy to, once you get into it and start working it, it's pretty easy to operate. So a new year coming.
Yeah, one of the great things about grassroots networking is that there is a lot of capability that can come into play. Jeanette, you're a great example of that, because 25 years as a public school teacher, correct? So in the Oregon Citizen Lobby, not everybody can come to the Capitol. A lot of people contribute by using their life skills by analyzing legislation. Some, in the middle of the night, whenever it works for them, from their home. They never come to the Capitol, but they look at legislation. So what I would encourage you to do is to get signed up to be one of our analysts and to look at education legislation. That's been your life's work. So having your perspective of bills that get presented during the legislative session from a real life teacher with life experience, and having you inform the rest of us about, is this a good bill? Is it a bad bill? How bad is it? How good is it? How could it be better? And getting your input there is a great way for you to contribute, as so many people from all around the state who are involved in that part of it, who can never come to the Capitol. It's great if you can come to the Capitol, it's wonderful, but they can still lobby from at home, but also analyzing the bills and helping us as the grassroots really understand how these bills are going to impact our lives is just critical. And legislators are, usually pretty good at telling us the big bills, but how about all the other bills that add into the continuing morass of the way to describe it, of regulation, from administrative rules right on to the statutes. And if we're not aware of some of that stuff, then we can't hold legislators accountable, because many times legislators will introduce legislation that they are betting on nobody knows about, okay? And maybe they do it just to satisfy a particular group or a constituent or whatever, but it's not good legislation. Or maybe it is good legislation and it never sees the light of day and nobody knows about it. Well, we want to look at that legislation, and then if it's bad legislation that a good legislator has introduced, we let everybody know about that, okay? Because that's one way that you help keep legislators honest. And having served 8 years in the House of Representatives, it's easy to get caught up in the legislative session and introducing ideas or concepts that maybe are not well thought out and you probably shouldn't be doing. Sometimes groups come to you and depending on your personal motivations, I never did this, but I saw other people do it, that will introduce legislation for a group that is really contrary to what this person believes and probably most of their constituents. But they did it for a group because that group gives them money. Money is always the mother's milk of politics, sadly. It is money and power. It's what drives politics. We're blessed to live in this great nation and to have this opportunity to have our constitutional republic. But the question is, can we keep it?
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. Bob, you're muted there. And yes, we can keep it if we keep having good, God-fearing, liberty-minded people.
Amen.
That understand what is at stake here, and it's been too many decades of apathy and I'm not my brother's keeper type of situation, and we need to get out of that and back to the duties and responsibilities of being a citizen, not only of the United States, but of Oregon and then whatever city, town you live in. But I gotta go myself. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you all. Be blessed. Keep the faith.
Thank you, Jeff.
Happy New Year to everybody. Thank you very much for participating. We'll be back at 1 o'clock next Saturday. And so keep an eye on your email for an updated announcement on what we'll be training on and who our guest trainer will be. So thank you very much and God bless.
Thank you.
Patient, Jeff.